Go to McDonald's this week and just order a sandwich. 3 times they will ask you, what do you want to drink? And you basically say water. They'll again ask you. They don't consider water as a drink. They'll ask you again, what do you want, some Coke, this, they basically want to sell you a drink. A Harvard scientist came up with a methodology of looking at ingredients for how spicy it should be, what's the texture, how sweet, how salty the ingredient should be to be palatable, to sell. What will it take for a consumer to say, I want another bite? They're trying to figure out the mass population. What will it take for them to want to crave to eat more of that food? This is our cafeteria in schools. And I remember when I went to Indiana, I actually sat down with the superintendent. I said, how can we get this out of the classrooms, the break rooms? And so we did a presentation. I was at the hospital system then. We did a presentation to their board, and literally I got shot down. There was not one board member in that year that actually supported the idea. I just wanted to kind of share with you what the structure kind of visually is. That you got the glucose, you got the fructose, and then you got the sucrose. Sucrose is S. Sucrose, 2 in the morning, sucrose is sugar that's on your table, right? S sugar. Glucose and fructose. Fructose is a poison. And at the end of the day, all of this stuff is going to go to the liver. And it's not bad in itself, but it does bad things because it just collects in the liver and doesn't get metabolized like the way glucose does. Basically, this is not unique for sugar in particular. It's basically a Harvard scientist came up with a methodology of looking at ingredients for how spicy it should be, what's the texture, how sweet, how salty the ingredient should be to be palatable, to sell. What will it take for a consumer to say, I want another bite? They're trying to figure out the mass population. What will it take for them to want to crave to eat more of that food? So it's called the bliss point. This is our cafeteria in schools. And I remember when I went to Indiana, I actually sat down with the superintendent. I said, how can we get this out of the classrooms, the break rooms? And so we did a presentation. I was at the hospital system then. We did a presentation to their board, and literally I got shot down. I was thinking they're gonna give me a box of chocolate for coming up with a method of how to get rid of this, and campaign to the moms to say, we're gonna get rid of all these vending machines. And I was shocked. I was just shot down. Basically, there was not one board member in that year that actually supported the idea. They gave me some really good lip service by saying, well, it's a really good idea. This is what we want. But at the end of the day, you know what they said? We want to educate our children to make the right choices. So we don't just want to give them the right choices for 6 hours a day in school. We want to educate them to make the right decision 24 hours. So when they go home, they can make the right choice. So we're giving them a choice in school. So the reality was every vending machine in that county made $1,200 to $1,500 per machine per month. So what basically they said is, Patel, if you can come up with this dollar amount every month from all the machines we have, then we'll take it off the shelf. So this was a study that was done in 1 year. They took out the vending machine in the schools and they looked at it and said there's a direct correlation with the weight, steadiness of the weight versus increase in the weight in 1 year by removing the soda machines out of the school system. This came out in 1972. Basically, it was a British endocrinologist. And I think if you are a book reader, you want to read a book, this is probably one that will surprise you to say that original content is 1972, but it looks like everything every line in that book is probably real, applicable today. There are some school systems that have actually implemented this a few years ago and have some amazing results. So basically this kid drinking some pop, okay? So when you drink this pop, what happens to you before you eat? So let's say you have a Coke or whatever drink of your choice, and then you're gonna eat lunch. Or you're drinking and eating lunch at the same time, whatever that may be. What happens? Ghrelin is a hormone, okay? It's basically, what does it do is my question to you. Is it stimulated or is it decreased when you have a pop? So fructose, what does it do to this hormone? So basically the right answer is it stimulates this hormone because it's a hunger hormone. It stimulates appetite. It increases food intake. It promotes fat storage. So with all of that said, you increase this with fructose in the drink, so you're gonna eat more food. Go to McDonald's this week and just order a sandwich. 3 times they will ask you, what do you want to drink? Right? And you basically say water. They'll again ask you. They don't consider water as a drink. They'll ask you again, what do you want, some Coke, this, they basically want to sell you a drink. That is part of the strategy, is that if you drink, you're gonna eat. Now, what happens to the leptin? So fructose that's in the Coke or the food products, the leptin hormone is a negative feedback to the brain, and it's basically saying I'm full, and this hormone is decreased. There's no feedback. It doesn't impact it. So basically, when you eat, leptin's not there because the fructose is not going to stimulate the brain. If you were to look at what's the little cube of sugar, you go to restaurants and you put those little sugars in your coffee or tea, it's 4 grams is 1 teaspoon. And Coca-Cola, 1 can has 10 teaspoons. This is 6.5. Can you imagine 6.5? This is 8 ounces. Can you imagine 6.5? It won't even wet my throat. So this is in 1915. So if you drank one every day, 6.5 Coca-Cola ounces, you'll gain 8 pounds. This is what basically came out after the World War II, right? And there was no sugar rationing at that time, right? After the World War II. So it became bigger. Now you can afford more for the same price of 6.5. Why wouldn't I drink 10 ounces now? Kid in school today is about 75 grams compared to 15 100 years ago. So I'm going to show you this experiment, and this was done, I believe, in Boston or I forgot, I should recall, but this was an experiment done on rats. And basically this rat, I'm going to pause it for a second. So if you notice what happened, let me see if it goes forward. So what happened, this is a second rat that actually got fructose, a high fructose diet for 24 hours, only 24 hours. And he can't find a safety net, a safety zone. They put him in this bath of water. He can't find that safety area, right? And if you notice when the first, I'll forward it or rewind it. This is the healthy, look, he goes right to it, finds the safety area. So the question now is, what are we doing to our brain? Impact that sugar has, fructose has on the CNS, okay? There's some ties with Alzheimer's and sugar. I don't know where that is, but I gotta tell you, this is rats. We're not rats, I get it. So some of the people are gonna argue and say, well, this study was done in rats, not in humans, but the logic behind it, I mean, half of our medications that go into the industry come from lab animal, trials and whatnot. But the reality is, it's real, and it was at a university, and I can quote you 3 or 4 other similar studies. It just didn't have cool videos, so I only pulled this one out. But it's not just this study. There's multiple studies out there that basically say sugar basically has an impact in your central nervous system. Some of them are very tightly related to Alzheimer's. British Medical Journal in 2003 came up with this article that basically quote was, "There's no association between sugar consumption and obesity." Okay, now this is in British Medical Journal. Reputation is on the line. It's 2003. It's a study conducted. So now the question is, what's the magic question? First of all, logically, who's going to believe there is no association between sugar and obesity? In 2003, this is not 1923. This is 2003. We know a lot about medicine, and at least about sugar and obesity and diabetes. So when they say there's no, so now the next question is, who ran the study? It was by a scientist from a food industry that ran the study that was fueled by the food industry, the entire study. So they did that particular book reviewed some 7 countries. This is back in 72, 73. So they reviewed 7 countries and said, okay, what is the sugar and fat related to coronary vessel disease? So what is the correlation? So they reviewed 7 countries and they found that Japan and Italy was on the bottom. And if you think about it, what does Japan and Italy have in common is they eat a lot of, Italy, let's just do Italy. Italy, they eat pasta all day. But what do they have in common? You know, they don't have many sweets. If you think about it, what Italian sweets are there, right? Except the ice cream, gelato. When you look at the common denominator, it's not the fat, it's not the carbohydrate, it's actually the sugar that's in the foods that they eat. So the other, of course, USA was on the top of the list. About late 90s, really late 90s, the food industry was losing a lot of grounds, a lot of noise was being made in the public about sugar and obesity, and that how the sugar is all over in every product. So all of these major competitors that normally are fighting to compete to sell a product to a consumer and going to the grocery stores and wanting the space on the shelf to be closer to the main door, not at the end of the store. These are the competitors that actually got together in '99 in Minneapolis. So they have these scientists that were hired by themselves, these food companies, and they were analyzing all the things that were out there and coming up with solutions or answers or whatever. I don't know what happened in that room, but the bottom line was you got all these competitors getting together trying to figure out how to battle the noise. So at the end of all of this, nothing really changed. What happened is it went to Congress, some recommendations on what the rules, or maybe put some stipulations, put some warning signs, and put the limitations on what the amount of sugar should be in some containers. All these things went out to the White House, and essentially 5 months later, nothing got done, nothing. And when they started looking at it, the House, the senators, the Congress people, they basically 80% of them were paid by the food companies. So let's do a quick question. Why is fiber important in obesity? Fiber basically binds to a lot of the carbohydrates and reduces absorption and the insulin response. So now you got to relay this message to our patients, right? And you can't get it that complicated to our patients. So reality is, fiber in our diet has gone down from what it was. So if you were to look at the early 90s and look at the sugarcane factory, not the factory, but the farm workers in sugarcane fields, I guess, and they ate sugarcane all day. They lived till 100. But think about it. They're eating sugarcane in its entire cane. Can you imagine eating an entire stalk of sugarcane? Now, the executives, what do? The executives took the sugarcane and made juice out of it and put it in a cup and had like 10 sugarcane sticks in one cup and drank that whole thing. So now you got no fiber and you got all the fructose. The metabolic syndrome, when we look at it, I guess, this has been sort of probably in the vocabulary over the last 5 years, more so than ever before. Not that we didn't know it, but now we know it's kind of a conglomerate of different diseases that causes a common problem. It's hypertension, lipids, baseline inflammation, and the insulin resistance and obesity. And I think hypertension, we said. The negative feedback from being full after you eat, that's the leptin. There's resistance, so you don't get a response that you're full, so you just keep on eating. Fructose is not glucose. It never has been, it never will be, and we need to make sure that we clearly define the two sugars are not the same. It's not what you eat, it's what you do with what you eat, right? So, I mean, of course it is what you eat, but you got to take it one step further and say, how are the stuff that you're eating metabolized? If they're not metabolized, not stored right, then, you know, it's probably not going to work out. Can we make an impact? The answer is yes, we can make an impact. We have a critical mass. We have 60,000 covered lives. We have a group. This is our group right here in this room that can say, what can we message to our patients? How can we message to our patients? Whether we do these maybe 2 or 3 minute clips, we put them in the waiting room, whether we, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of methodologies of doing this. What are we doing in terms of helping them shop? You know, their grocery list is probably the most horrible list known to the planet. That's why they're gaining weight. You know, I mean, they'll say, I'm not eating much, but they're eating the wrong stuff. You know, they may not be eating a lot of calories, but they're eating the wrong calories. And so there was a study that was done out of California. They took a family of 3, mom, dad, and a child about 8 years old, and they basically said, if you commit to us, we will feed you gourmet food, feed you for 1 month, but you got to eat what we give you. And basically, the dietitian went to their home and saw what they shopped. They just said, go shop, come home. And all the foods that they brought, and they put it, and she actually took a one of those old-fashioned coffee jugs and basically put sugar in there and said, this is the amount of sugar you are eating per month per person. And when you see it that way, it's wow. And that was their centerpiece on their dining table for 1 month. And then they gave them food to eat. The food that they gave was controlled with no or minimal fructose. And basically within 3 weeks, they felt better. Labs looked better just in 3 weeks. That was impressive. I thought it'll take 3-4 months. But in 3 weeks, when they repeated the labs, even the labs looked better.